Okay, now we are going to embark on a journey that will lead us to an appreciation of the diverse Asian cultures that, on the one hand, originated outside of the orbits of China and India, yet on the other hand, were heavily influenced by the imperialist tentacles of either one or both. And as you are learning from the textbook and in my previous presentation on Japan, Korea was the mediating influence between China and Japan. In fact, to my understanding, Japan owes its foundational heritage to Korea. Korea had advanced society several hundred years before the Japanese organized under Yamato rule. And meanwhile, to the south, independent political organizations arose on the mainland and the archipelagos or island chains in the Pacific. After World War II, historians began identifying the area as Southeast Asia, denoting an enormous and varied area containing mountain ranges, fertile valleys, and rainforests, and occupied by a diverse mixture of races, cultures, and religions. Myanmar or Burma, in the northwest portion of the southeast mainland, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, in the southern portion of the southeast mainland, and Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines, constituting the island chains. Now, Korea has been inhabited since Neolithic times, but because it was strongly affected by its proximity to China, many times it is referred to as the little brother of China. Yet the people emerged independently from the mountainous peninsula thousands of years before the Common Era. Now, the first recognizable political state was Gojoseon. Relations between Korea and China go back to mythology. One historian, recounting the Samguk Yusa, or the memorabilia of the Three Kingdoms that was written in the 13th century, traces the founding of Gojoseon to 2333 BCE by Dangun Wagyeom, or Tangun, the offspring of the divine Hwanung and a female bear that was transformed into a woman. This myth symbolizes the arrival of bronze. Dangun was born on the third day of the 10th month, and so today, the 3rd of October, is celebrated as National Foundation Day in South Korea. Now, Chinese culture was likely brought to Korea by refugees fleeing the 4th century BCE conflicts of the Warring States period. A Chinese sage named Jisi and 5,000 followers left China and settled in Dangun's kingdom. When Dangun retreated to a mountaintop to meditate, Jisi was made king. And despite the myth, by the 2nd century BCE, Gojoseon collapsed and its successor states were no match for the Han dynasty. Now, the Han were primarily interested in Korea's natural resources, especially salt and iron. The Han divided Korea into administrative units. Gojoseon's territories would later become Koryo in the north, Koguryo in the north, with the southern part split into the three states of Baekje or Paekje, Gaya or Kaya, and Silla in the subsequent Three Kingdoms period. The four states of the Three Kingdoms period, between 57 of BCE and 668 of the Common Era, were in constant rivalry, and they formed ever-changing alliances one with another, but ultimately they came under the rule of the powerful Tang dynasty. Koguryo, with its capital at Pyongyang, prospered in the 5th century of the Common Era, dominating northern Korea, most of Manchuria, and a portion of Inner Mongolia. Silla, meanwhile, with its capital at Gyeongju, flourished through centralized administrative systems, prospering on the eastern coast due to agricultural innovations such as oxen-drawn plows and irrigation systems. Silla overcame resistance efforts from Gaya and Baekje, continuing a system of division of power between king and local lords. Now, the system of government of the Three Kingdoms mirrored Confucian ethics. One historian describes the rule that would remain for the rest of the history of ancient Korea. A monarch ruled with the aid of senior administrative officials drawn from a landed aristocracy. Government-appointed officials administered the provinces with the aid of local tribal leaders. And the majority of the population were landed peasantry, and the state extracted a tax from them which was usually payable in kind. The state could also oblige citizens to fight in the army or work on government projects such as building fortifications. At the very bottom of the social ladder were slaves, typically prisoners of wars or those in serious debt, and criminals, who were forced to work on the estates of the aristocracy. Now, there is a fascinating history of infighting between the Korean states, at times settled by outside intervention from China. In some years, troublesome peoples in the ruling elites of the former kingdoms were forcibly relocated. In other years, village headmen were compelled to send their eldest sons to work in the capital administration or military. Most often, the rigidity of its class structure led to frustration, as a strict social classification of entitlements and obligations denied people opportunities to rise above the class of one's birth. With stagnation of ideas and innovations, the aristocracy resented the power of the king as the peasantry grew more and more resentful of the incessant taxes levied upon them. And then on top of that, local landed aristocrats became ever more difficult to control from the capital. Now, as the state was falling apart from within, an able military general and administrative ruler named Wang Khan, or Wang John, in 918 of the Common Era, began the unification of the country, and by 935 of the Common Era, established the Goryeo, or Goryeo dynasty. Now, the Goryeo would rule Korea for over 400 years to 1392, and it is the name of this kingdom which is the origin of the English name for the peninsula, Korea. Wang John selected the northern city of Songdo, modern Gaesong, as his new capital and declared himself king. And for his contribution to creating the new state, he was given the posthumous title King Taejo, or Great Founder. And from then on, the kingdom flourished. Korea minted its own coinage, produced silver vases, invented movable metal-type printing. Confucian principles were followed in the state administration, and Buddhism was established as the official religion. With prosperity came an increasing decadence among the ruling elite, with corruption and social unrest following. Open rebellions broke out in 1126 and 1135 of the Common Era, which were ultimately quashed. But matters only became worse as coups, assassinations, and slave rebellions plagued the century. Worse was to come when the Mongols invaded in 1231. The ruling elite abandoned the country by moving the capital to Ganghwa Island, leaving the rest of the Goryeo population to face 6 Mongol invasions over the next 3 decades. And by 1258 of the Common Era, the people had had enough and the military ruler was assassinated, the king reinstalled with full powers, and peace made with the Mongols. Korea would not be independent again until the general Yi Seong-ji formed a new state of Joseon in 1392 of the Common Era.